Another guy who's fantastic at what he does is Ted Nguyen, who covers the NFL and the 49ers for The Athletic, and he's with us on the Uma guest line to talk some Niner ball. Ted, how are you?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I appreciate you coming on. And you're one of the guys that I really love reading in The Athletic. I think you do an amazing job, man. You take a lot of time. You watch that film. To me, there's an awful lot of people with big voices and big opinions, but how many of them actually roll that dial back and forth and, do the due diligence and do the work to have the knowledge to be right? I think everybody's I don't want to say everybody's lazy, but there's not a lot of people out there that want to take the time that it takes to roll that film back and forth, and the answers lie within. I appreciate what you do, man.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot more takes going out there than actual analysis. So happy to add to that. And I'm glad that there's a lot more film guys popping up and, giving takes that come from the film rather than just wherever these hot take guys get their stuff from.
There you go. The old saying, I lie, you lie, the film never lies, right? The film never lies. Dane Brugler is another guy I have great respect for. In his latest mock draft in The Athletic, he has the 49ers taking Anthony Membow from Missouri with the 11th pick, and then coming back in round 2 with Walter Nolan. And, Ted, if this is the way this goes, I'd be very satisfied. Membow is a 2-year starter. He gave up 0 sacks and 9 pressures and 410 pass blocking snaps. PFF ranked him as the 4th best offensive lineman in the nation, 6'3", 3 1/4. And then Nolan, I'm a big A&M fan. He was a 5-star. He's one of the best defensive tackles in the country, and I don't know that he's going to wind up in round 2, to be completely honest. But 6.5 sacks, second in the nation as far as PFF, as far as his run grade, 91.6. He's a wrecker inside. What do you think of those two guys? What do you think of the Niners going maybe offensive line, defensive tackle to start the draft?
Yeah, I haven't really gotten to a ton of my draft prep yet. I usually do that after the Super Bowl is over, and I'm just playing catch up, trying to watch as many guys as I can before the combine. But I do think investing in the trenches is important. I think part of the Niners' philosophy for a long time has been to really invest in the skill players and then coach up guys on the offensive line. And obviously they've had great success in the last few years, but some of those offensive line issues have been, reared its ugly head this year for sure, especially when Christian McCaffrey's down and you don't have the full assemble of the Avengers out there on the offensive side of the ball. So I think with the way the league is moving now, building a strong offensive line definitely helps you. I mean, if you look at some of the top teams out there, like the Eagles, the Ravens, even the Bills, everybody's trying to really load up on offensive line because defenses have gotten so small and teams are playing so much too high that, when you're able to just bully guys up front, it really gives you an advantage.
No, it's a great point by you. Ted Nguyen with us from The Athletic on the Uma guest line as we talk a little bit about the 49ers. And the Niners, of course, are already embarked on their offseason and are trying to, get back into the playoff picture. There was a story today that Dallas has interest in Robert Saleh as a head coach. We know that Saleh is going to interviewed with Jacksonville on Tuesday. He's going to interview tomorrow with the Las Vegas Raiders. It sounds like Saleh may wind up getting one of these jobs. If he winds up going to Jacksonville or Dallas or the Raiders and takes a head coaching gig, who do you think the Niners' number one choice of DC becomes?
Probably Ulbrich. I think they had interest in bringing Ulbrich in last year, obviously, but that didn't work out. It seems like they're not going to move away from their philosophy, their single gap philosophy, and getting coaches from that Seattle tree. And I think Ulbrich is the next best guy available. Obviously, if you get Robert Saleh, that'd be phenomenal. But if you don't get him, I think Ulbrich is a pretty good backup plan.
Ted, the one thing that really bothered me about the 49ers this year was just they showed no ability to run the ball in short yardage or on the goal line. And then at the end of the year, Shanahan was just stopped calling running plays on 2nd and goal from the 4, 3rd and goal from the 4. He's passing, kicking field goals. They're not running it in the low red zone. They're not running it inside the 5. We've talked about all these great lines. I mean, we didn't even mention Kansas City's interior or Detroit's 5-man line's probably the best going. But what can the 49ers do? I mean, when you're watching the film, is it that, you talk to Chris Forster, and he makes Jake Brendel sound great, okay? And he was a Pro Bowl alternate a couple years ago. But if you talk to the people at Pro Football Focus, they say Jake Brendel's not great. And what do you see when you watch the film? The Niners clearly struggled to run it in the low red zone. Is it the line? Was it the back? Is it the play calls? Why did the Niners struggle so mightily to run the ball down low in the red zone?
Yeah, I think part of it is definitely their outside zone philosophy. I mean, even when they were at their peak, they had some problems running the ball down in the goal line as well. I think outside zone works great from 20 to 20, but once you get into that red zone where everything is tighter and it's harder to get some of those gashes to inside that those outside zone plays create. You have to be stronger. You have to be able to run duo. You have to be able to run power and some of those inside run plays, and that just hasn't been part of the Niners' philosophy. And that's kind of where the league is moving towards now. As you mentioned, with defenses getting lighter, you see some of these top teams really kind of leading into the gap scheme runs. And I know Kyle Shanahan has been an outside zone guy forever, and I don't think they're going to make a huge philosophical change. I mean, Sean McVay did it. He was an outside zone guy. Now he runs a ton of gap scheme with the Rams. But I think the outside zone will always be part of the Niners. But I wonder if they do start moving with the league a little bit more and making gap schemes a little bit more part of their offense. They're never really going to go off of it, but maybe they just run it 10% more than they usually do. And to do that, you need to get a little bit beefier up front, like we mentioned. But I think doing that will help improve some of the red zone issues they had.
Let's talk Brock Purdy. First couple of years, a lot under center, a lot of play action pass. This year, a lot in the shotgun, much less under center, much less play action pass, more of a downfield passing attack. Why the switch in your mind? Why? I mean, we never really ever get a straight answer from Kyle because there's some gamesmanship in this whole thing. You're not just going to tell everybody, you're not going to read your mail publicly for your opponents to then decipher. So I understand why he plays his cards close to the vest, but in your opinion, as a guy who watches film, why the switch from year 1 and year 2 to what we saw this year?
To me, I think part of it is they trusted that Brock Purdy would take the next step as a passer and really make this offense a little bit more Brock-centric. Everything in this offense has been about the outside zone and the play action off of it, and then you have the mismatches created by Christian McCaffrey and moving Deebo Samuel here and there, and that was the offense, and it worked extremely well. And as part of why this offense has been very quarterback-proof too. Jimmy Garoppolo goes from being a plus starter to a guy who is pretty much a backup quarterback when he's outside of the system. So I think part of this is just they trusted Brock to take the next step as a passer. And to me, he has gotten better as a passer, but obviously, there are some things that are outside of his control, like injuries to his receiving core, offensive line, and those sorts of deals. But to me, it's like, can Brock Purdy really take a hold of his offense and be kind of a Matt Ryan or somebody that they could really rely on in a drop back game rather than having to do play actions and all those things. And I think this experience is good for Brock, but I don't know if he can be that top 5, top 10 type quarterback that can lead this type of offense. And now they know that, I think they have to go back to finding ways to run the ball better and create some of those mismatches. But also at the same time, I think this is a good learning experience where, he will be better in a drop back game because of it. But at the same time, it's not what you want to build the offense out of for Brock Purdy.
Did the film show that Brock had lost arm strength in your mind from last year to this year?
No, I don't think so. Not, maybe I wasn't looking for it, but I didn't notice a notable drop in his arm strength or velocity. Is that something that you saw?
No, I mean, there were times where I felt his deep ball hung, but we're talking about wet conditions, wintry conditions,
Yeah.
so it's sometimes hard to tell if it's arm strength or if it's grip on the ball. I did feel there were times that the deep ball hung, but then there were other times I felt like he really zipped it out, and threw into tight windows and had some zip. Greg Papa and Tim Ryan made a point earlier this week or maybe last that they believe that the 49ers are maybe a little hesitant to give Brock that record-setting contract, which would be north of $60 million, north of what Dak Prescott got from Dallas. And I heard Pop say that he believes the Niners prefer a deal maybe in the low $40 million a year range as far as AAV. That may not be the key number, the AAV. It's probably more about the guaranteed dollars. But what's your thought on the Purdy negotiations? Where do you think this thing – you think it gets done quickly? And where do you think he winds up sitting?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as a team, that'd be ideal to get that 48, average per year. But it was just with the way that contracts have been moving, some of the numbers that he has put up in the past. It's going to be really hard to settle on a number that low. I think it probably ends up somewhere between 40 and 55 mil. It's tough for me to see him getting one of those record resetting type of contracts, especially because he wasn't a former first round pick. I think, with those former first round picks to get a little bit more leeway, like Trevor Lawrence, even though he hasn't really performed like a $50 million quarterback. So, I mean, to me, Brock doesn't seem like a guy that's going to really push extremely hard to be the highest paid quarterback and the holdout and everything because of it. I think it kind of settles somewhere between 45 and 55.
Interesting. Last one for you. We appreciate your time. If Robert Saleh isn't the guy, I mean, Shanahan said at the presser that he's open to a switch of scheme. There's an awful lot of the best teams in football running a 3-4 front. The Niners run a 4-3 wide 9, and they seem to want to stay with it. And that seems to be one of the attractions of Saleh, is the continuity that he represents, because Chris Kasarik would probably stay, and they'd stay with their wide 9. Where are you weighing on this as a guy who rolls that film back and forth and studies the rest of the league? Would you rather the Niners stay with the wide 9 and their 4-man front, or would you like to see them, switch to a 3-4 and really have a dramatic change on that side of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've built their philosophy on this, wide 9 and getting guys upfield, so their players are built that way. I think it'd be tough to make a scheme switch. I think, if they do make a dramatic scheme switch like that, it might not look great in that first year. It might be one of those deals where it looks better in the second year, and, with the aging roster, we don't know who's all coming back, but I imagine a lot of these Niners are coming back. Can they afford that type of time it takes to really make a dramatic switch? I mean, you would have to get beefier personnel. I mean, the guys that are on the team have to really change the way they play. That'd be tough. And it's not like the single gap scheme doesn't work. I mean, if you look at the Texans and what DeMeco Ryans is doing in Houston and how hard those guys play and how disruptive they are, this is still a scheme that works. I mean, it probably needs a little bit more of an updating as far as coverages and disguising and maybe adding an effective pressure package. And I think Saleh does a lot of those things. I mean, to me, DeMeco was always the best defensive coordinator that Kyle's ever had, but Saleh does a lot of those things too. So I think you can't stick with this scheme. I wonder what's going to happen with Brandon Staley. I mean, Staley, he obviously flamed out as a head coach. I thought he would get more interest as a defensive coordinator after his time with the Chargers. But, I mean, if you do want to make a scheme switch, I mean, Staley is one of the, really knowledgeable guys about the modern 3-4 and the Fangio defense and those type of things. But, I mean, just having him on staff, and I wonder if they do keep him to just kind of continue to update and add, another voice, even if they get Saleh or Ulbrich. But to answer your question, I do think this scheme works. You just need to update kind of the third down package and the disguising and those sorts of things.
Ted, always love to rap with you. Ted's a great follow on X at FB_film analysis. Ted, thanks for popping on KNBR and sharing some of your knowledge. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me on.